We begin our journey with a structure that played a key role in the life of the city, the Old London Bridge. It took 33 years to build, and it stood for more than 6 centuries. Stretching 275 meters, the bridge rested on 20 Gothic arches. On the southern side, travelers were met by the impressive 3-story South Gate, which became the site of one of London's most gruesome displays. On its roof, the heads of executed prisoners were mounted on spikes and coated in tar, a chilling warning to anyone entering the city. But passing under its dark arch, the bridge opened up into a narrow, bustling street. It was densely lined with houses, shops, and workshops. Life here was lively and loud. Merchants called out their wares, carts rattled across the wooden planks, and the hum of daily trade filled the air. A few buildings in, at the center of the bridge, stood a structure that stood out from the rest. The famous Nonsuch House. Built in 1579 without a single iron nail. Using only wooden pegs and beams brought from the Netherlands, it became England's oldest prefabricated building. Its Dutch gables rose above the bridge, while a narrow passage ran beneath it for people and carts. The flow of the river beneath its arches created dangerous currents, especially during low tide, making navigation treacherous. On the southern wall, a sundial served as a warning. Time and tide stayeth for no man. If a ship missed the changing waters, the furious current beneath the bridge could smash it to pieces. Around 200 wooden houses stood on the bridge, along with shops, goods, and living spaces. But on September 2nd, 1666, an event would occur that would see nearly 30 of these buildings burn to the ground. The flames spread incredibly fast, fueled by the city's mostly wooden buildings, while narrow streets and tightly packed houses turned the fire into an uncontrollable force of nature. We see the Thames by the Tower of London. To the left stands London Bridge, and to the right, the Tower. The city burned almost non-stop, and in just a few days, central London was reduced to ashes. The scale of the disaster is staggering. Between 2 and 5 September, some 13,200 houses in London were destroyed. Despite the massive destruction, the human toll was relatively low. The Great Fire marked a turning point for London. In the aftermath, the city was rebuilt. Streets were widened, buildings redesigned, new fire safety rules introduced. Stone and brick began to replace wooden structures. It forever transformed the face of medieval London. Far from the bustling streets of London lies our next stop, Richmond Palace. Rebuilt by Henry VIII on the site of a medieval manor, it became a favored retreat for the Tudor monarchs. Queen Elizabeth I, daughter of Anne Boleyn and Henry VIII, spent much of her time here. Beyond the palace walls stretched forests, her beloved hunting grounds, especially for deer. But her life began in tragedy. In 1536, when Elizabeth was only 2 years old, her mother was executed by her own husband, King Henry VIII. Despite this devastating loss, Elizabeth grew into one of England's most powerful rulers. She never married, earning the title of the Virgin Queen. Life in the palace thrived. Theatre troupes performed regularly, including the Lord Chamberlain's company. A young William Shakespeare was among the performers. The gardens and the River Thames reflected the luxury and grandeur of court life. It was in Richmond that Elizabeth I spent her final days. She passed away in 1603, bringing the Tudor era to a close. In Richmond, the nobility sought refuge from the plague and the clamour of London. The common folk, however, could hardly imagine a day without Cheapside. Here, the city's heartbeat was palpable. It was a place where life, trade, and ceremony converged in a constant, vibrant rhythm. At its center stood the Cheapside Cross. It was a familiar landmark and a gathering point for the townsfolk. Merchants lined the streets with fabrics, food, and all manner of goods. Soldiers, officials, and citizens interwove into a living tapestry of daily life. Today, modern Cheapside still traces the echoes of its medieval past. Walking its streets, you can almost feel it. Commerce and ceremony once danced together, each amplifying the other. The year is 1647. We've arrived at the edge of the abyss, Westminster. This isn't just a riverbank. It's the epicenter of a broken kingdom. To the left stands the old Palace of Westminster. Once the intimate home of kings, it has become the forge of Parliament. To the right, the grand silhouette of Westminster Abbey dominates the skyline. It is the spiritual heart of the nation, sacred ground where every king and queen has been crowned. Below, the streets and water stairs are a fever dream of activity. Travelers, merchants, and clerks crowd the area, using the Thames as the city's main artery. But the crown no longer sleeps here. The fire of 1512 gutted the royal private apartments at Westminster. The old palace was abandoned to politicians. In 1530, Henry VIII seized York Place from Cardinal Wolsey. He transformed it into a sprawling new seat of royalty. The complex was renamed Whitehall for the brilliant white stone of the new buildings rising along the riverbank. Within these very walls, the king secretly wed Anne Boleyn in 1533.
Poor Anne could never have imagined what the future held.
And only 11 days after Anne's execution, Henry VIII stood in the same spot with his new bride, Jane Seymour. In this way, the palace became a cold, private altar for some of the most fateful and tragic unions in English history.
Thanks for watching. Write in the comments which journey we should take next. Subscribe to the channel and see you next time.